everyone, welcome to our cookie decorating kit. We're going to do some winter themed cookies because it's getting really cold here in Northeastern Ohio. So if you would like to just grab a few things and join me, I would love to teach you some things about cookie decorating. My name's Denise. I forgot to introduce myself, and I'm the owner of D is for Delicious. And this is one of my favorite parts is teaching other people to fall in love with decorating cookies. I feel like you can get lost in it and just really enjoy the outcome in the end. So why don't you grab a few things before you get started? It's great to cover up your surface with some sort of table covering. I'm using a big piece of parchment paper. You can also grab a tablecloth. You can grab like a cookie sheet or something. Anything that can cover the surface so you have an easier cleanup will be worth it in the end, because cookie decorating gets a little messy. Speaking of messy, napkins or paper towels, grab some of those to have on hand. And toothpicks, great tool to use, and a pair of scissors. So make sure you have those things handy, and then we'll dig into our cookie decorating kit and take out our supplies. So there's a practice sheet that we're going to be using first. Some of the other supplies are extra piping bags, and that's because we might trim our bag a little too much at some point, and we may want to rebag our icing later and do the fine detail work. So those won't be used until later, so we can set those aside. Please don't trim your bags quite yet. I'd like to show you exactly how to trim those. I just would like you to get out all your supplies at this point. There are sprinkles that we'll use, so we'll set those aside. That's for a little bit later. And we have cookies as well. So let's cut our cookies out and just set these aside. That way when we're ready to decorate, we can jump right in. So I always like to start with the practice sheet because I feel like cookie decorating is kind of like a sport. You need to practice, and you can't just be super good at something without doing a lot of practice. So it's like our warm-up. We're gonna do a little warm up our muscles and our hands and get used to how the icing flows. All right, so on the piping bags, you'll notice that there is, these are tipless bags. So they're closed at the end, and we're not using any metal decorating tips. We're gonna just use the bag as it is, but we first need to trim a little bit off so that the icing will flow. So it's always easier to trim more as needed than trim too much right now. So start with just a little snip, just a bit, and I'm gonna test it out on the practice sheet to see if I can get the icing to cover up the lines. That's the goal. I would like to make a thick enough opening so that it covers the lines on the practice sheet. And a few things about how to hold the bag before you use it. It's much different than using a pencil or marker or any other type of art supply. So make sure that you're using your dominant hand, the hand you write with. You're gonna hold that at the top of the piping bag. So I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna put my right hand at the top of the bag, and that's where I'm gonna squeeze and apply the pressure. And with your other hand, you're just guiding it along. You're not really doing a whole lot with your other hand. It just helps to steady the bag. And then when you are trying to get the icing out, you want to squeeze just a little bit. It's a gentle squeeze. And to get the line to stop, you push down and pull up. Notice that my icing is hovering above the paper. I'm actually not touching the tip of my piping bag to the surface. So you're just showing it where to go. You're guiding it along. Push down and pull up to stop the line. So there's a bunch of lines on here. I'd love for you to just warm up your hands. If you're noticing that your icing is not coming out in a steady stream, it could be one of two things. You might not have your bag trimmed enough, so you might want to trim off a little bit more, or your squeeze may not be strong enough. So see if you can squeeze just a little bit more and keep the pressure steady as you're going, because if you let go of that squeeze, the line may dribble off a little bit too. So let's move on to the lines that have these curves. This reminds me of a roller coaster. So you're showing the icing where to go, you're leading the way, and that stream of icing is just following along. This just takes a lot of practice. I started decorating cookies 10 years ago, and trust me that every year I feel like I improve on my skill. So please don't worry if you're feeling that this is a little bit of a struggle. That's why we're practicing. And I promise the outcome after today will be really delicious and yummy. And you're gonna feel really proud of what you've done. So we gotta start somewhere, and we might as well start here on this practice sheet. So circles. These are a tricky shape to do because that circle just goes in a perfect circular motion, and our hands aren't meant to do anything perfectly. So don't worry if this one's a little challenging. I go around my circle clockwise, but you may find that you like going around counterclockwise. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm just sharing with you how I do it, and if that works for you, great. But if you figure out a way to do it that works best for you, go for it. Let's end with some hearts. And then we'll be ready to move on. We did it! Great job! Good practice work. I wish I could take a look at what you did, but we're gonna set that aside. We don't need to do anything with that. I just wanted you to warm up your hand muscles and get a little familiar with how the piping bags work. So we're gonna break our cookie decorating class into 3 steps. Here they are. First, we outline. Second, we flood our cookies. And third, we detail them. So those 3 steps are really important that we do each one in that order, and then they'll turn out just the way that you saw in the example photo. I promise you can do it. So let's set out our cookies. I'm gonna put 3 in front of me, and I'm gonna put them in a certain order. I think they're the order that we should work on them. Why don't we do snowflake, snowman, and mitten, and in the top row we'll do the others. I feel like we're gonna go a little bit from easier outlining to a little more challenging. So that's why I divided it this way. All right, so color-wise, you have 4 colors to work with. You can use any colors on the cookies that we're doing today. You don't have to do exactly what I do. Design them however you wish. I'm gonna trim off my other 3 bags so they're ready to go. And then we'll get started. I love this set of cookies. I'm so excited about all the fun sprinkles we get to use. I think they're so much fun. All right, so on the snowflake, I think I'm gonna do a traditional white snowflake. When we do outlining on the cookie, it's similar to the practice sheet, except you're gonna try to get your icing to go as close to the edge of the cookie without going over. So start anywhere you'd like. Start following the shape. And you'll notice that there's a very repetitive pattern happening on this snowflake. That's why I think this is a good one to start with. Your hand starts to have muscle memory, and it'll just keep going in this same motion. I'm trying to get my icing as close to the edge without going over. If you go over a little bit, you might want to take your toothpick and just scrape off any areas that you're not happy with and then fix it. Like I have one little line right here that's a little too close to the edge. It was going over a bit. So I want to repair that, do a little cookie surgery, and fix it because this is going to make the barrier for my next step, the flood icing. All right, so moving on, let's do the snowman. I'm going to use white again. And I'm just following the shape of the cookie. I try not to show too much cookie peeking through the edge. So I try to get it up as close as I can. Great. So we're done with these 2 shapes. Let's move right on to the mitten. So I want to decide which color do I want my mitten to be. And I'm going to make my mitten, the mitten cuff one color and the whole mitten a different color. So I'm going to leave a little bit of an area at the bottom alone, which is where my cuff will go. And then I'm going to make the rest of the mitten a bright red. So I'm planning ahead. I made that area red, and I think green would look fun with this. I'll make the bottom area green. So I just created those two areas, and then I'm gonna stop. And next step is I wanna work on these cookies, but notice how they're farther away from my body. I would like them to get a little bit closer. So I'm going to very gently push them up. I'm not gonna handle them because I don't wanna damage the outlining that I just did. I just wanna very carefully move them away so these can be brought closer to me. All right, so the next shapes: snow globe, coffee or cocoa mug, and a hat. So the snow globe and the cocoa mug, they're not tricky by any means, but they just require a few more steps, a few more sections. So here's what we're going to do. I think I'm gonna make the base of my snow globe red. So I'm going to start and imagine there being like a little stand that this is resting on. I'm gonna make that red. It can be any color really. And I'm gonna use blue and white on the snow globe to create a wintry scene. All right, so I'm gonna imagine a sky, and I'm just gonna have it be a rolling landscape there where the land meets the sky in the distance. I'm gonna make the top portion blue, which will be my wintry sky, and then the base here is going to be white, which is where the snowy area will be. All right, and that's as far as I'm gonna go on that cookie. See, that wasn't that hard. I think I made it sound like it was gonna be so challenging. See, you did it, good job. That's what I'd like you to do, and stop on that one. Cocoa mug, so cocoa, coffee, latte, whatever warm drink you wanna imagine in here. You can picture that there is a pile of whipped cream on top of a mug. So let's make that pile of whipped cream first. So to do that, I'm just going to use my white and make a just scalloped edge there that resembles a really big pile of whipped cream. I can almost see it now. And then the mug, I'm gonna go with green. I haven't really used green a whole lot, so I am going to make a mug with the green. And I'm just gonna follow the outline of the cookie. Notice how there's a handle. We're gonna bring it to life and make it look a little bit more dimensional at a later step, but I promise it's gonna look like a handle a little bit later. And then the hat. So you can have it match your mitten, so it's like a set, or you can do something totally different. I think I am going to make my hat green. I'm gonna do like the reverse of my mitten. I think I'm going to do a green hat with a red brim, and maybe we'll just do a white pom-pom on top. So I didn't mention my hat. We are located in Chardon, Ohio, in case you're not familiar with that. We are the snow capital of Ohio. I think it's actually the snow capital of Ohio. In college, there was actually a class I was in, it was like geography, and in the textbook, it said Chardon is the snow capital of Ohio. I was like, hi guys, I'm from there. So that's pretty exciting that we're known for our snow. So first step, you guys, is over. You did it. Great job. We can move on to the next step. So let's move on to the second step, which is flooding. All right, so to do flooding, we are gonna use the same icing here. We just might wanna trim it a little bit more, tiny bit more, especially if you trimmed it on the smaller side. Like, think of the difference between fine point pens and broad point pens. You just wanna trim a little bit more. Don't chop it off, just a little bit. And we also are going to get our sprinkles ready because it's during this stage that we're going to use some sprinkles, if you'd like. You certainly don't have to. but if you want to add these little sprinkles, we want to have them ready. So in the one container, you'll notice there's like a lot of snow, and then there are also some little winter friends. There's a polar bear that we have. There's a penguin. And what's the other one? Polar bear, penguin, and a snowman. So those are circulating in all our kits. So I'm not sure which one you have, but I hope you love it as much as I love these. So I'm just setting out I'm separating my snow from my snowman parts. And then the other sprinkle container has some sprinkles that I thought we could use on the top of our like hot cocoa mug, if you'd like, or you use it on the snowflake. Wherever you want to add sprinkles, feel free to add sprinkles. If you feel that you're being called to add sprinkles somewhere, go for it. All right. I'm not going to add sprinkles to everything because I'd love to show you a few other techniques and you might want to try those too. All right. So I'm going to shuffle my cookies around. I'm going to start flooding the cookies that I outlined first. So I'm just getting those closest to me because I have the most control when they're close to my body. All right. So toothpicks are handy during this step as well for spreading the icing. And when you flood, there's really no difference between flooding and outlining other than you're going to squeeze a lot of icing this time. You're gonna hold it the same way, but this time you're just gonna squeeze it on there. Doesn't matter where you start. I think as cookie decorators, we all tend to find just what works best for us. I notice I follow along the shape of the cookie on the outside and work my way in. And I'm just kind of moving it back and forth, hoping to blend the icing as I connect the areas. So I'm using the tip of my icing. My icing bag is right down on my cookie. And I'm letting go of my pressure a little bit right now because I notice there's a lot of icing on this cookie. And once there is so much icing on, I'm going to use my toothpick for just the fine details here, where I'm going to gently push the icing right up to my outline. I don't want to see any cookie peeking through. And I'm working rather quickly because this icing will start to dry and crust over. And so I want to be done playing around with it before that happens. So you'll notice as I stop moving around the icing, it starts to settle down and it starts to dry real glossy. So that's all I'm going to do right now on that snowflake. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to add some details on top of this icing after it's dry. So I'm going to move on to my snowman. And on the snowman, I am going to add some sprinkles while the icing is wet. I'm going to add 2 eyes. I'm going to add a nose. And I'm going to add those other 2 black balls to be like the buttons. So I put a bunch of icing on. I'm looking up over my cookie to make sure there's no extra cookie peeking through. I like the flooding to cover up every area. Okay, and after I do all of my spreading out, I'm going to get the eyes first. So get a little grip on it. Imagine the placement. And I kind of just dropped it down. Once I was in the right spot, I just dropped it. I don't really want to press it down. I guess it couldn't hurt to take my toothpick and just tap it down. Make sure it's got a good grip on that wet icing. It's going to serve as a glue and just really hold it in. Okay, here's the little sprinkle carrot. I'm doing it sideways so the pointy part comes out. And then I'm going to leave this area alone. So imagine a scarf is going to go in that area a little bit later in the detailing step. So I'm going to put my buttons a little bit lower. There we go. And there is our snowman. I just tapped it down real gently. So those will glue right in there and become part of that surface. All right, so the mitten. I would love to show you something on this mitten called marbling. And marbling is so much fun. I think you might just love it. You're gonna wanna do it to all your cookies after this because it's such an easy technique, but it looks super fancy. You're gonna look like a cookie pro after this. So I'm putting a lot of icing on here. It seems like too much, but it needs to cover up your whole cookie. And speaking of too much, if you happen to put too much on, which I might have on this one, I'm noticing that I put a lot on. What might happen is icing could drip off the edge of the cookie. And all that means is you put on a little too much and your outline couldn't handle that much inside. It's not a problem. What I recommend you do is just let it dribble off and you can fix it later. I'll show you how to fix it later because I think it might happen to mine. So here's what we're gonna do for marbling, you guys. We're gonna take 2 colors. You could use 1 color or 2 colors. And we're gonna make a few lines. It doesn't matter the direction. I'm having the lines go horizontally or across the cookie. And in between my green stripes, I'm going to do some white. And in a moment, I'm gonna use my toothpick and I'm gonna blend the lines together and it's just gonna look so magical. All right, so here's how it works. So you're going to take a toothpick and you're gonna press down on your cookie. You're gonna drag the line down. You're going to drag it up, down and up, down and up. So I went down and up, down and up. If you just go all down, that will also be a really fun effect. If you drag them all up, it's gonna be beautiful. Notice how it just, well, on mine it's dribbling quite a bit because I got carried away, but it is just creating this cool pattern in the background and that's going to dry as one solid surface. All right, so that is flooding and I think we're gonna do the same thing on the hat in a little bit. But let's shuffle our cookies around, get these other cookies close to us. And that cookie is flooded so much. I think I'm just going to do this. There we go. All right, so let's work on our snow globe. So imagine a snowy scene in the background. We're going to create a sky that has snowflakes, mini snowflakes, kind of built into the sky. So let's flood that blue sky. Get a toothpick. And then in that blue sky, I'm going to do a combination of 2 types of snow. So I'm going to show you a marbling technique that is using like polka dots because I'm going to make some big flakes of snow in the background with these. I'm just squeezing my bag and letting go. So it's kind of the same motion when you stopped a line on your practice sheet. You're just squeezing and letting it go. So I'm creating some really big flakes in the background, and I'm also gonna add just some little snowflakes. You can add as much or as little as you'd like. All right, and then I'm gonna just make the bottom a very snowy base. I think I'll add some of that snow down here too. White sprinkles on white icing still looks really cool. I go through a lot of toothpicks when I work on cookies. I like to have a fresh one because I never want to mix a different color with white especially. So I'm going to add some snow down here just so they match. And then while the icing is still wet, we're going to plop that little winter sprinkle in my case, the penguin. Maybe you have the penguin or the polar bear or the snowman. And we're gonna just plop him down. Just drop him and just press down real gently so he glues down to the surface. Isn't he so cute? All right, and then I'm gonna flood the base of the snow globe. My red is on the very thin side, so I am gonna be more cautious on this one. This area is small, so just use a little bit of icing and push it around. There we go. And our snow globe is done with the flooding step. It's almost done completely. We'll do a little bit of detailing down on that base in the end. All right, so with the cocoa mug, I am just going to flood the two areas. Actually, before I start, I remember I want to use some sprinkles on top of the whipped cream. So let's do that area first. That way sprinkles don't accidentally get onto the mug part. If you're going to use sprinkles, they do tend to go everywhere. So good to flood the area where you'd like the sprinkles to actually go first. I wipe my toothpicks off once I notice there's a color on it. Okay, and then we're going to add some sprinkles. All right, there's so many Christmas trees on this side. I need to add some red. There we go. I'm going to tuck one of these back onto the area. And it's always hard to stop, isn't it? I'm going to move on to my flooding on the mug now. I'm going to remove this one little sprinkle that got stuck on there. All right, so let's move on to the mug. Flood this all green. Maybe you liked that marbling that I showed you on the mitten. You could do that on the mug. That would look super cute. I'm just going to do plain green because I will add some detail after this dries. So I'm just going to flood this a solid green. But you can do this however you'd like. There, and once you push all the icing up to the outline, that means you are done flooding. And then you can move on. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Isn't this so relaxing, this part? I think flooding is so fun. All right, so the hat. We're just gonna do these different areas in the color that I outlined them, although that's not a rule. You don't have to do it that way. Notice how the tip of my bag had a little bit of green on it. So I'm just gonna dig those parts out. It's really easy to fix mistakes at this portion because the icing is wet and it can just come right out. All right, so I did that. I'm going to flood this part green. I think I'll do some more marbling on this hat so that it matches the mitten. All right, going to add some lines that are red and white. just gonna do one white line in the middle. No. There we go. I had room. And then remember marbling. You press down with your toothpick and drag the icing. So this only works when the icing is wet. It has to be brand new fresh icing to work. I couldn't go back to my snowflake and flood because that icing has already started to crust over. So you have to work with it while it's wet. And then for the brim of the hat, I'll just do a solid red here. And spread that out. All right, you completed the second step. You just did all your flooding. Great job. So at the end of this step, I feel that it's very good to step away from the cookies for a little bit, like for maybe ideally 10 minutes would be great. That would allow the surface to dry just a little bit so that we can put some finishing touches on top in the detailing step. So maybe go grab a snack, go do a little something, and then come right back in about 10 minutes or so and we'll get to detailing. Alright, so we have had a little bit of drying time. Do you notice that the glossiness has gone down a little bit and now it's a little bit more of a matte finish? So that means we're ready to move on to our final step, which is the detailing. So before we do that, some of my bags I trimmed a little bit bigger when I was flooding. So we're gonna rebag some of those colors right now. So in order to do that, you wanna get your bag ready. It makes a loud sound, so I'm not gonna talk over it. So I always put my clean hand inside, fold over the top, and then do this away from your cookies. You don't want to do this right over your cookies. It could get very messy. I am going to take the colors that I think I trimmed the biggest, which on mine are my green and my white. You're gonna chomp off a big hunk of icing. Insert that bag into the new bag. Squeeze out the icing. And then tie a knot. And now you have a fresh start. So I'm gonna do that to my white. Maybe your colors are different, but those are the ones I know I trimmed on the big side. So doing this, it doesn't change the icing, but it changes the way it will come out of the bag so that you can use a fine tip again for some of the detail work. All right, much better. So I'm gonna move some of my stuff aside. I get so messy when I decorate. All right, and with my new colors, the new bags, I'm just going to trim off just a bit, not too much, just nice and small to start. And then we are going to put some finishing touches on the cookies. Alrighty, so on the snow globe, you know, there's not really anything more we need to do other than I like to just highlight the base of it. Maybe you want to write something down there. That would look cute if you wrote 2020 or 2021 because you're looking forward to the new year. I am just going to outline it. It just adds a little bit of dimension. And that's all I'm gonna do with my snow globe. That cookie is done. It looks finished. All right, now with my mug, you know, some of that icing dripped over. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a toothpick, and because it's crusted over a little bit, I'm just gonna scrape some of it off. Take off that icing that rolled off the side and just clean it up a little bit. See how easy it comes off? There we go. I just cleaned it up a bit. Not necessary because I feel like the more icing, the better. But if you want it to have a crisp, clean look, that's how you fix it. Now, on that handle, remember I said I would show you how to make it look like a handle? Here's how you do it. You make what looks like the letter D. And that gives it that dimension. I also like to outline the whole cup. Just go around the outside edge again. I just think it gives it a more defined look. And then inside the mug, I'm gonna put a snowflake in the middle. So I think I'll take my red and I'm gonna start with an X. And then I'm going to do a big plus sign. All right. I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'm gonna do one more little touch to that, to those snowflake-like portions. All right, so on the mitten, the only thing I'm gonna do to this is add a little bit of something to the cuff. I love to add the same color on top of the same color. I think it looks so crisp and clean, and I'm gonna give it this ribbed look. So I'm just going up and down, green on green, and see how it just gives it a little something extra? I love how that looks. So we're gonna shuffle our cookies around and detail the others. All right, on the snowflake, I am going to add some of the blue to my snowflake. And I'm just gonna go inside each of these snowflake peaks. Just making lines going from side to side. Okay, and then after that, I'm gonna do V's. I'm gonna do 2 V's in each of these areas. The color white looks really nice on top of white too. Any color, any of these colors will just look so fun on the snowflake. All right, and there is your snowflake. Isn't that cute? The hat, I'm gonna do that same ribbed effect on the brim of this. And I'm also going to go on the little pom-pom, and I'm going to do some little polka dots. There's that. And with the snowman, let's give him a scarf. How about we give him a blue scarf? So here's how I do a scarf. I put one little line up here, and then I make a V. I make one side of the V longer than the other, and then I keep going over it, just to make it as thick as I'd like the scarf to be. There. That guy is all done. And on the mug, you know, what I wanted to do is I wanted to add some little dots at the end of each one. I don't know if it's dry enough quite yet to stand out, but I'm just gonna add some little dots. It's just so hard to stop working on a cookie. I never want a class to be over, but I think it's over. I think we did all of our cookies. I wish I could jump through this camera and look at what you did. I really thank you for joining me today, and I hope you had so much fun decorating these cookies. Please be sure to check back in with us to share your photos. We'd love to take a look at what you've done. Share it on social media. It's always so fun to see what you guys do. And we will be releasing new kits every week in December. So touch base with us again to see what's next. We're gonna have some other fun sets in store, and we hope you'll join us again. So thanks again for joining, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.